Welcome to the Amazon Investor Coalition podcast. Let's dive in.
In the months to come, we will discuss about XPRIZE Rainforest Award for New Biodiversity Assessment Technologies with Peter Houlihan.
My name is Peter Houlihan. I started with XPRIZE Rainforest, formerly, as Jonah mentioned, Rainforest XPRIZE, a little branding redo, last spring. So after the pandemic, everything that I had been doing previously in terms of contracting, consulting, a lot of different work, coordinating logistics for scientific expeditions in tropical rainforests, convening local experts and scientists to get into different tropical rainforests to collect data that can be used to inform different conservation action or policy with NGOs, universities, museums, governments, US embassies. And so all of that work came to a very quick halt in March of last year. And I ended up taking on this role overseeing XPRIZE Rainforest, which is a 5-year, $10 million competition aimed at improving the survey speed and data analysis from technological advancements to better inform and more quickly inform conservation in these environments. And so I'll share a bit about that today with a little bit more of my background and why we're doing this. And one thing that's important to understand is that XPRIZE inherently is focused on the technology. And I think that there are many ways in which we've been working to expand the impact and the insights that can be gained from this work over the past year, because it's such a huge opportunity. And similar to this group, I think there's a lot of power in convening all sorts of people from different sectors. One of the major bottlenecks, I think, in this space of conservation technologies for rainforests has been historically a lack of collaborations, a lot of, from academia to different tech sectors, a lot of people operate in very siloed spaces. And so if we can convene people around thinking in a more interdisciplinary way moving forward, I think there's a lot of potential in that. So with that, I'll share a presentation to give you some more background. All good?
Looks good.
All right, so great. XPRIZE has been around for about 25 years. It's a future positive movement aimed at designing and operating multi-million-dollar global prize competitions that push the limits of what's possible and solve grand challenges on our planet. And this approach, which was certainly new to me when I joined, but found it very exciting because I had never seen quite a massive opportunity for the rainforest space. But this goes all the way back 100 years to even Charles Lindbergh's Flight Across the Atlantic was an incentivized prize-based competition. And XPRIZE's first competition, and XPRIZE, really drove the privatized field of space flight forward. The winning technology from that competition was bought by Richard Branson, became Virgin Galactic. And companies like SpaceX, in many senses, were born out of such an era. And on that note, just a week ago, XPRIZE launched the biggest prize competition in history. Just not only just XPRIZE, but in general, a $100 million carbon removal XPRIZE. And this is certainly something that, as this continues to develop, I think will be of interest to many people here, aimed at technologies that can remove massive amounts of carbon from the atmosphere. So certainly something that we could talk about another time, also with the subject matter expert on that program, but we're excited about that potential as well. And as you see at the headline of our website, this is just a screenshot of the top of our website, xprize.org right now. Later this week, we'll be hosting an event convening our ecosystem around XPRIZE Rainforest. A number of people in this Amazon Investor Coalition are speaking in different parts of that. So if you go to xprize.org, you'll see that banner. You can click on it. We have 2 very full days of phenomenal speakers And the idea is basically to bring together people from all of these different sectors, fields, perspectives, experience, um, collectively to be talking in this space. This past year, as we've been working to get information out about this program amidst the pandemic and so much Zoom fatigue, we figured we might as well just bring together our ecosystem of people that are affiliated with this and host an event ourselves. So with that, um, XPRIZE Rainforest, as I said, is a $10 million competition over 5 years to enhance our understandings of rainforests around the world. It's really a technology and data-driven competition. And I'm going to highlight a bit of my former work that kind of informs why this is necessary. And I'll use some of my images photographing for National Geographic to kind of tell that story. So as we are all aware on this call, tropical rainforests cover only a small percentage of the Earth's surface, less and less every day, and yet are home to massive amounts of biodiversity, endemic species all over the world, and also provide endless ecosystem services to indigenous peoples and local communities and humanity as a whole globally. And certainly, I think that if anything, 2020 really showcased to the entire world how imperiled and fragile our environment is and the grand impacts of where we are at these massive tipping points from all sorts of degradation, opening up of intact environments and exposing them in a variety of ways to also, in particular, unleashing pandemics. But these impacts, certainly, I think the speed and the urgency and the rate at which the environment globally is deteriorating, we need new and faster ways to conduct the work that we all do. And so everything from deforestation, mining, wildlife trafficking, we are teetering on such a destabilization that our own natural buffer of resilience actually is why we need something like a carbon removal XPRIZE, because the resiliency of these environments has diminished quite substantially. And so this, ironically, was a year ago in Western Tanzania, not wearing masks yet because of the pandemic, but because we were working with chimpanzees, but very soon we would realize this whole new world that we're living in. And to add to that, of course, air quality has declined. Last year was an unprecedented year in terms of intensity and number of hurricanes in the Atlantic. And so ultimately it comes down to, in many senses, the speed at which we are able to respond. And the work that I've been doing in terms of facilitating logistics for a variety of expeditions over the years, while I think many people here can agree that the field component of this work is exciting, and many of us may be field people at heart, but it's very time and labor and cost intensive. And so the process of spending months or years or even decades in terms of long-term studies in the field, collecting data, and then subsequently multiple times on the back end of analyzing those data to get to a point where we are informing action or policy, we simply don't have that kind of time anymore to immediately get to a point where we're using data and facts in our decision making. And so a lot of this work, while we will not be able to expedite all of it overnight, we could certainly hone in on ways in which the survey speed and data analysis are more immediate, so that we can gather insights about the health and the well-being of tropical forests in near real time. And so a lot of these methods, from camera trapping to using drones, surveying a variety of layers of tropical forests, all of these can be harnessed into new approaches using audio monitors in the canopy to assess passively biodiversity in different areas. These technologies also have as many people may suspect or be aware, much farther reaching. We use these audio recorders in the Congo for detecting birds, but also chainsaws and gunshots. And so there are many other far-reaching uses of different technologies, well beyond just surveying biodiversity on its own. And so if we can improve this technological interface and create more efficient tools, and in many senses, we don't need to totally reinvent the wheel, but perhaps apply technologies that already exist in new ways to address these complex challenges that we're facing. Here, even just a year ago in Cameroon, installing a new Wi-Fi to satellite network where local Cameroonian scientists can use this open source platform to track, monitor their data live. So they could be in a base camp or in Yaoundé in the city or elsewhere and be monitoring data that's running off of this tech network in real time, ultimately bouncing off of satellites. And again, ironically now going back to Elon Musk, this was a SpaceX launch, launching the new Starlink network. So all of that is to say, as all of us are aware, tropical rainforests are extremely complex, diverse environments. And I think the approaches that we utilize need to be equally complex. And with that, I'll share a little bit about XPRIZE Rainforest and start with sharing our video.
The rainforest, an area home to more species than anywhere else on Earth.
I feel like I'm in the heart of everything. There's a thriving that is really powerful.
An area that cleans our air, purifies our water, and holds many of the important solutions to tomorrow's problems.
This rainforest is instrumental to the survival of the entire human race.
We need to protect what we have. The future of humanity is at stake.
How can we monitor a large area of forests that would provide us with a view of the tropical forest functioning?
We need nature.
So that was a promo video that XPRIZE put together at the launch of the competition about a year and a half ago. And it's more or less still accurate. We've updated a number of things, including quite a bit of the language, and also our rules and regulations for the competition. So ultimately, this technological approach, the idea is to really set an audacious but achievable goal in terms of what would be an amount of time and amount of area that would really push people to document biodiversity in a certain amount of, in here we set it at 24 hours, 100 hectares, and what kinds of insights could be gained from that. And so certainly there's no, I guess, expectation that teams will be able to comprehensively survey the entire biodiversity in that area in that amount of time, but can we push the needle forward in terms of the technology that can ultimately be used and scaled more broadly and widely beyond the scope of competition? Our rules and regulations that were just updated last month are on our website, rainforest.xprize.org, and it outlines a lot of these new components, a lot of new language about the competition. We've worked with a number of people actually in this group on a variety of different aspects, and I'll get to that. But the idea is also, despite being a biodiversity-focused, technology-focused competition, first and foremost, the idea is also that teams will be evaluated on insights that they can gain from those data. And so we don't just want teams to develop species lists, but what is the meaning of those data and how can they actually transform approaches to conservation, policy, education. They can approach that in many different ways, and we'll work with teams to structure and guide these approaches. But ultimately, we want to know how teams are developing their technologies and solutions, what will ultimately be the broader impact of this for local, regional, and international communities. Teams can really come from anywhere, whether that's startup companies. We have had middle schools and high schools. We have teams that are indigenous communities and groups. We have a variety of conservation NGOs. So really the idea with this one that's been very interesting is that there isn't a self-sustaining industry of conservation technology in this space. There are people that work in this, but we've been, I think the thing that's been most exciting about this is the opportunity to really catalyze and mobilize that movement around this, and to do so in appropriate ways moving forward. There are a lot of benefits for teams in competing. Certainly they have access to verify their technologies and testing. I think it's a really great opportunity to convene an ecosystem of people with similar shared interests. For example, later this week with our event that we're hosting, and for our teams that have access to those individuals, organizations, companies, there are a lot of fundraising opportunities, which I'll mention in a little bit. There's media exposure. And then ultimately, I think that there are ways to also revolutionize the field in itself. I think we can all agree that historically the way conservation has been done needs to be changed in pretty much every facet. And so how can we steer that into new approaches for the future, especially the tech sector and how not are approached. And with that, we've, since the very beginning of this, and when I previously had spoken, we've established a great advisory board, as well as a judging panel that will ultimately be evaluating the technologies that teams deploy in the field. And this will be expanding when we hone in on where the technology testing will take place. Also, with a variety of people on this call and others, we've established an Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities Working Group to really guide and steer every stage and phase of this competition, to revise constantly different language and messaging, and to ensure that throughout this process, we're establishing opportunities, workshops for our teams, opportunities for all teams to become as interdisciplinary and collaborative and inclusive as possible, so that their approaches are co-designed and in a collaborative way. So if anybody's interested in joining these calls, we tend to have them about every other month, and that's kind of an ever-growing group. And we've really been grateful for collaborators from a variety of different organizations who have really been open and honest that we've worked with to, I think this program in itself, there's a huge opportunity behind it, and we have an ability to really shape and direct where this goes, and ultimately the impact of what this opportunity can provide on a much larger scale long term. We've also established a funders roundtable, and a number of people on this call have also been participating in that. And this is basically an opportunity for philanthropies, donors, funders to, when we close registration a month from today, beyond that, we'll have an idea of who our teams are, what their approaches are, and we can work together to also provide additional opportunities for them to seek further funding to support and invest in their technologies, so that ultimately we hope that as many teams competing in this as possible come out with successful solutions that are useful to as many groups and organizations, communities as possible. Right now, we are closing our registration pretty soon in 1 month. And over the past year, we've really been developing and building this out. May 6th is when teams will be required to submit a qualifying submission that really articulates who their team is, what their experience and background are, what their approaches are, what does that team composition look like, how do they plan to be working with Indigenous people and local communities in their design process and execution and deployments. And then ultimately the testing will begin 2 years from now. So there's quite a bit of time before we get to that, but semifinals testing we've expanded to take place in multiple locations around the world, and that's because of where our teams are coming from, which I'll show in a moment. But we'll be looking to host different testing opportunities in probably a minimum of 3 in Africa, Asia, and the Americas, to increase accessibility to these testing locations to our teams coming from around the world. And that will be for up to 25 semifinalist teams. Up to 10 teams will qualify for the finals that will take place in 1 location in 2024. So this is quite a long program. There are a lot of opportunities to continue expanding and building this out throughout the life of this prize and well beyond. It's also the first XPRIZE competition to integrate an impact stage into the timeline beyond awarding it the winners, and that's to ensure that technologies developed are also scaled and amplified beyond the competition itself and have real world impact. One additional aspect to note for teams competing is that those teams that make it to the field testing rounds will be splitting milestone prizes. So those up to 25 teams will split $250,000, and the teams advancing to the finals will split $2 million. And so we recognize that it costs money and resources and time to invest in developing these solutions. But the teams that actually make it to the testing will receive quite a bit of funding to continue supporting their efforts throughout this process. Right now, we have 250 teams that are either registered or pre-registered from over 53 countries, which we're really excited about, and that there's just a lot of interest. And here's a quick breakdown of where these teams are coming from. And our fully registered teams, which we imagine this will go up because a lot of teams end up waiting until the final days to fully register, but there are 20 teams so far from 10 countries. And so we're working to convert those other 230 teams and get them fully registered and participating. Again, those top 25 teams will be splitting milestone prize in a couple of years, so it's kind of worth that upfront investment to get to that point. And we'll also work with our funders roundtable to provide additional opportunities to teams throughout. So just in closing, one more push for this event in a couple days, Thursday and Friday of this week. If you go to just xprize.org, you'll see the banner at the top for this. Also on our XPRIZE Rainforest page, rainforest.xprize.org. And we've got a great lineup of speakers. So again, here's our website. This is our general XPRIZE Rainforest email. You can also email me directly, just peter.houlihan@xprize.org. So with that, stop sharing.
The analysis of an investor is figuring out what the profit opportunity is. And so to do that, you, like for space competitions, you look at the budgets. How much is NASA spending each year on sending people up to outer space? Then you figure out, if I carve out some segment of that for my company, this is my possible return on investment. So getting at the possible wealth creations opportunities from the Amazon. There's this 1996 paper that I found through the United Nations. I guess the UNEP program was a reference for them. It's called Valuing Biodiversity for Pharmaceutical Research. They try to group together different biodiversity indicators and then indicate how much that forest is worth or how much it could be worth. The numbers they came up with back in 1996 weren't that significant. It didn't inspire. There needs to be more. As part of the competition, have you guys looked into this? Is there updated research?
Yes, I think that there's something we're working to navigate. Is there a lot of tricky aspects regarding data rights, ownership, and things like that, and appropriate approaches to that topic, especially depending on where testing takes place. And I think there's a great conversation to be had in shaping. I think when I came on board, there were a lot of concerns and hesitations, even many that I had myself, of this can vary. Like, I think the initial aspects of some of this could come across as very exploitative in some pharmaceutical ways or other types of avenues. And so I think that there is a great way to talk about navigating those aspects. Pharmaceutical approaches and regulations within the competition, we haven't specifically honed in on yet, but certainly I think in an economic sense, there is a lot that could be done in that avenue. But
okay. So this next question might be something that someone from the audience might be able to answer. You might have an answer, but it's linked to the pharmaceutical question. So I've read that 25% of pharmaceuticals on the market today originate from tropical forests. And so you could look at all those products and figure out, what the market size is. It's a $5 billion market or whatever. And then you could also look at how frequently new, tropical rainforest pharmaceutical breakthroughs are made. And so you could again make some calculations about market opportunity in order to figure out the potential income generation that could come from your new biodiversity assessment technology. What is the size of the market? That's the big question I'm getting at. Do you have an answer to that, or does someone else on the call have an answer to that they would like to come off mute to answer?
I don't specifically have a dollar amount on that. I'd be interested to hear, though.
Does anyone else on the call know how much those 25% of tropical forest pharmaceuticals, how much they're worth as an industry? Well, that's something I bet we can figure it out. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the last question, which again ties into the same thing, which is about the biomimetic entrepreneurship opportunity. So copying life. The classic example I'm familiar with is Velcro. Everyone knows what Velcro is. It comes from biomimetic entrepreneurship. A guy walked through a forest, some burdock seeds got attached to his pants. He looked at them underneath a microscope and then came up with Velcro. So the same kind of opportunities can come out of biodiversity assessment from tropical rainforests. And I'm wondering, is anybody aware of any research about the size of the biomimetic entrepreneurship industry?
Size of the industry, I'm not sure. I think that one's an interesting one that constantly keeps expanding. That could certainly be something that teams develop this insights component of the competition allows teams to kind of impress us in certain ways. There's also a $250,000 bonus prize that the judges can award at a discretionary basis for just something exciting that kind of goes outside the realm of the competition. But I think with our funders roundtable, these are things that we could, host workshops to talk with our teams about these kinds of markets more and provide those opportunities to discuss how might there be an economic argument that could be layered into teams' approaches to quantify the value of standing forests in this way, or certain products that could provide economic benefit.
Great. One.
I did not know about the Velcro one, by the way.
Oh, well. One person has messaged me privately, saying these numbers are really hard to calculate. It's hard to define, but some number over 20 to 50 billion. And it depends on annual sales and patents and things like that. So I'm going to open it up now. Does anyone else on the call have questions for Peter? Feel free to go ahead and come off mute and ask a question. If you're dialing in on the phone, it's *9. I've got a couple. I'm going to give it a couple more seconds, and if no one comes along, I do have other questions. Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
Oh,
there we go.
Go for it, Fiona.
Sorry. Hi. Just wanted to thank you for all your dedication and exploration on this, as there are so many different layers and potentials as we look at technology around the globe, as we just even talked about the valuation of a forest standing, or the medicinal values of a forest. Again, you're dealing with patents, you're dealing with distribution, you're dealing with ownership and regulations, again, global regulations of where, for example, that medicine. Let me just take dragon's blood, and where in that, for example, what the value of that tree standing, or how does one extract the dragon's blood from the tree. There are extraction methods that are more holistic. There are more technology of it that can be used, but you will get, because the market value of the commodity is so high, that you will have people cutting it instead of extracting it. So that's an example. So again, how do you define its valuation on a global market level when it comes to whether it be a patenting process in pharmaceuticals? So it's very complex answer to that question. So here, my thought is also how XPRIZE, how are you organically working with the Indigenous communities, with the technologies, with the different systems of law, and how are we going to all figure a way to collaborate in an exponential way? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and Jonah, you just listed the Nagoya Protocol, and that and others are written into our documents about the competition to really steer certain aspects of we've had a number of conversations both with our judging panel and our IPLC working group. TOSA is on both of those, and really having these deep conversations about exactly what Fiona, I believe it was, yeah, what you just mentioned regarding patents and the complexity also about every country has different elements of this, and also the co-designing aspects and knowledge ownership, data rights, things like that with Indigenous peoples and local communities. And so this is a huge aspect, I think, that's really central to the competition. It's one of the deepest parts to to figure out in terms of the challenges of developing such a broad program that has so many complexities throughout. So all I'll say is that we've been working to provide a framework in terms of the structure of how the competition is laid out, so that teams have to approach it in certain ethical ways, that they won't even be eligible to, their solutions won't even be eligible to compete if they don't approach it in a appropriate way that we've lined out. And then also providing throughout a variety of different opportunities, whether that's workshops. We've discussed a number of ways in which we could provide workshops that are almost case studies to expose those involved in the competition to a variety of different ways. Technologies have been co-designed or entirely developed by indigenous groups, but this is a kind of a whole I don't even know, layer of the program that has become very central, and I think for really critical reasons. So ultimately, for this to be successful, necessitates, these are some pretty, it's interesting being on many of those calls because I don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all answer for any of these things. And so it's a matter of navigating what works in all of these different ways. So anyway, that's kind of a broad answer and kind of open-ended because it's a constant work in progress. But certainly anybody who's interested in joining some of those calls, we're happy to have some of these conversations, provide more opportunities. I think ultimately, both in the IPLC sense, also with the funders groups, to ensure the long-term success of solutions coming out of this, we want to kind of mandate different workshops, trainings throughout so that everybody is kind of approaching it in a similar mindset.
Great. Are there questions from others? I've got an additional question. Tell us a little bit about the Elon Musk announcement and possible pathways that you see of that effort integrating with this one.
Yeah, that evolved very rapidly. Maybe not even 1 month ago, Elon tweeted just from the hip that he would be donating $100 million to a prize-based competition focused on carbon removal. And behind the scenes, that was had been briefly mentioned with XPRIZE, and Elon has supported XPRIZE competitions as a sponsor in the past. And so that very quickly developed in terms of the past couple weeks, meant it was somewhat all hands on deck getting this up and running. I think it's an exciting one because certainly technologies that could more, I think a lot of people's responses were, Elon, just plant more trees and we'll be fine. But the reality is that the amount of human-induced carbon in the atmosphere is so monumental at this point that we kind of need additional help to pull some of that out. It's kind of beyond natural buffers of resiliency that many believe. And so I'm curious to see how this progresses. The actual rules and regulations or guidelines for that competition will be released on Earth Day. So I'm still not entirely sure of all of the details and specifics about it. But I think that I just had a call with Anusha, our CEO, just before this about connecting these types of climate-focused projects and environmental projects at XPRIZE together a bit more. So yeah, I'll keep you posted as that develops, because I think there's a lot of synergy there between these, certainly the communities of people that are interested in these topics. So.
I'd like to propose a brainstorm to those on the call. And that's about the Nagoya Protocol and the intellectual property side of this. So the Nagoya Protocol basically requires profit sharing from wealth creation that comes from biodiversity research. So if you're a company and you discover something in a rainforest that has in a country that has ratified the Nagoya Protocol, then your company is required to share 1% of profits. I have no idea what the numbers are, with local communities, and there's certain criteria involved. In order to defend something like that, in order to interrogate in a court of law, there needs to be a lot of documentation. There's a lot of research that is going into the therapeutic impact of ayahuasca, its ability to help people overcome trauma and things like that. And if you source your ayahuasca originally from Brazil, then you're out of the Nagoya Protocol, but you have to deal with Brazil's Genetic Heritage Management Council. If you source it from some other country, because the vines, they transcend boundaries. Anyway, so here's the brainstorm opportunity. When we were building Nexus 10 years ago, a whole bunch of different law firms were interested in providing pro bono legal counsel for us, because we convene investors and philanthropists. They see it as a way that they might be able to pick up new business. There may be a lot of entrepreneurship that comes out of this challenge. Does anybody have ideas for law firms? Could we create a coalition of them to help navigate the intellectual property quagmire that comes from wealth creation from XPRIZE discoveries? Does anybody have any recommendations?
Jonah, I have a guy, I know a lawyer who works with the Brazilian biodiversity, excuse me, sorry. A lawyer here in Brazil works the Brazilian biodiversity side, with that specifically with the cisgen. He's somebody that comes to mind, and there's somebody else in a friend he's a FDA lawyer in Miami, and he works with, he's done a lot of stuff on the regulatory side as well, with cannabis and whatnot. So he's somebody else that I could put you in touch with. So those couple of people come to mind.
Great. Hank,
Thank you.
Go ahead and you've sent me a private message. If you can go ahead and mention it publicly, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I think CNM is a great one because they do have a lot of on-the-ground lawyers who's always been very passionate for this type of initiative. So I know some folks here in Washington, D.C., as well as in Asia. So I'm more than happy to connect accordingly.
Okay, great. And CNM stands for Cromwell and Mooring, LLP. Fiona, do you want to go ahead and mention the group you named? Fiona, I think you might be on mute. Fiona has pasted that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So ELAW is a group that works in environmental law policy around the globe. It's a nonprofit. I have had the honor of collaborating with some of the most powerful environmental lawyer teams. And I think that's a very deep aspect, is that it's the voices, for example, whether it be in Panama or in Ecuador or in Colombia, many of the indigenous peoples have already become lawyers. They can speak for themselves. And I want to address that it should be a collaboration, working with environmental lawyers that are living and thriving and protecting those forests. So that's the group. ELAW is one of the groups that I've had powerful relationships with.
Great, we'll look that up. I've also heard of Client Earth. Go ahead, someone else.
Jonah, hi, it's Atosa. Thank you, Peter, for this great presentation. Hi, everybody. I don't have a lot advice for law firms, but I just want to remind us about the mid 90s, the ayahuasca patent lawsuit that went into the U.S. courts. There was a guy who tried to patent ayahuasca, and there was he really he got a lot of pushback. Anyway, I actually can I'll look for a link to put in, but it affected U.S. international patent policy, and it went all the way to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, and COICA was very actively, and CL, attorneys from Center for International Environmental Law, or the people who, and I think there are a few other groups from Washington that also participated in the lawsuits. Anyways, just to mention that there's some precedent for this kind of thing specifically.
Great. This seems like a potential significant collaboration between the Amazon Investor Coalition and XPRIZE. We can create like an intellectual property council and come up with some recommendations. And you know, publicly speaking, a lot of firms would like to, my guess is, provide pro bono legal support, not just for the protection of indigenous communities, but also for those who have technological discoveries. And a lot of the countries that have tropical rainforests don't have the the cleanest legal systems. So that's something that needs to be negotiated as well.
Specifically in ayahuasca, which I know is not the topic of this conversation, but given this has like been something that has advanced in other circles, there are a couple of international institutions like MAPS and ICEERS who have actually created some patent, some at least some policy declarations around the whole plant medicine protocols around patenting and intellectual property.
MAPS is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and ICEERS, I'll pull it up, International Council for something. Does anyone else have questions for Peter or this line of thinking?
Yeah, Jonah, I just wanted to say along this line of thinking, not specifically related to ayahuasca, but one of the things that we're looking at is some of these other palms and other fruits. We're in Brazil specifically, we see that there is a need for work to have them approved by the MAPAs, the Brazilian Ministry of Agriculture, or the Anvisa and stuff. So, this is something that I think, and I'm sure it goes across various countries. There's issues with respect to the nutrient qualities or the consistency across. Sometimes you have various species that are mixed together in some of these palms. So I think that's something, Jonah, that I think maybe this group could think about having resources for us to get, because if we want to build new chains for new, beyond acai and Brazil nuts and all that stuff. There's all these other palms and fruits that a lot of them go throughout the Americas. You have so we need to get these and then we can launch them here, and then other companies can be replicating that, and then I think that's a huge opportunity to really create these new supply chains, throughout all these countries. So I think that's an initiative that certainly could be multi-country and maybe needs to be addressed at each country level, but also could have a kind of a common umbrella to work on that. So that's something that I'd be interested specifically in being involved in.
That brings to mind another task. When it comes to pharmacological research in the United States, and any kind of research, technology industry, the US government puts a whole bunch of money into the National Science Foundation, and then more money in helping to commercialize discoveries that get made with public money and bringing them into bringing them to market. I'm wondering, Peter, does the XPRIZE have an association with governments and government investment agencies and exploration of sort of the R&D that may come out of the discoveries that come through this process?
Yes, and we're constantly looking for more collaborations in that area. One of them, I know Colleen was on this call for a little bit before she texted me saying she had to jump off, but GCF Task Force has been hugely supportive. They're actually a partner with XPRIZE Rainforest, and so all of their ministers, secretaries of environment, and all of the different subnational areas where they focus have been very helpful. And then that's on a prize level with XPRIZE Rainforest, and then XPRIZE as an organization has a number of different data connections and things like that. But I think that as we've just been discussing, the scope of the data and knowledge involved in this specific competition is very unique, and also vast. So, everything from whether it's genetic data to pharmaceuticals to drone imagery and things like that. I think that the ways in which data are collected and analyzed and all of that is very diverse. So I think we need quite a number of partnerships in all of these different areas.
For those who don't know, GCFTF stands for the Governor's Climate and Forest Task Force. It's a association of subnational governments created by Arnold Schwarzenegger 15 years ago. Great. Well, it sounds like we have a lot of work cut out for us, and an enthusiastic group of people to come together. Atosa, you have something else?
Well, I know I've been, I think one of the greatest things about being in conversations with Peter and the XPRIZE team over the last few months for me has been, beyond just the biodiversity technology for identifying biodiversity, is just this idea of technology for conservation and technology for land use management and planning. And, we've actually been able to have some conversations and tap in this larger brain trust of techno-minded activists who are attracted to the XPRIZE and this competition, but are part of a community that's maybe useful to really inspire towards technologies beyond just the particular XPRIZE technology. So I'm just saying that, for us as NGOs and working with indigenous peoples in the ground, for us to be really thinking about the kinds of technologies that are actively helping our partners protect forest, and finding that this community that XPRIZE is drawing on and attracting are also natural allies in that longer term agenda. So I just wanted to say that for me it's been interesting as well.
Great. And that points to a future need that we have, which is to showcase a bunch of these technologies. Some of them are represented on this call. Producers Market and Alan's work with blockchain and mangroves. Fiona.
Sure, yes. I just think it's an amazing opportunity to all collaborate, and very much excited that there can be in-depth understanding how technology can be good, but it does need to be shared. And so even that, looking at data and sharing of data and sharing of solutions, and inspired. Thank you all.
Great. We're reaching the top of the hour. Peter, do you have more to add before we conclude?
Might just put a link to the event later this week in the chat if you haven't already. But I think, thank you all. And thank you. So many people in this group have been hugely supportive and collaborative. And I think that one of the exciting things about this is just the opportunity of what we can all accomplish, I think, in our respective organizations and companies, projects, whatever. But I think that feeding off of each other and brainstorming in this way, even the IP discussion, it'd be great to chat more, I think, and brainstorm on that front as well. So I think that all of these conversations have been mutually beneficial to continue moving different agendas forward. So just thanks, Jonah, for convening this group, and everybody who's come along for the ride on XPRIZE Rainforest. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. For more investment insights, subscribe and visit AmazonInvestor.org. Stay savvy, stay connected.